This is the last in our Unfollowed Easter series. Over the last few weeks, if you've not been along with us, or even if you have, just to recap, we've been looking at characters who, from the Bible, who followed Jesus, disciples who followed Jesus, and then as the cross came into view, and as maybe they started to realize that this wasn't going to be such a simple ride after all. It wasn't just all going to be about watching miracles and listening to great teaching and governing to just taking over all of Israel. When they realized there would be a cross, these followers, at least for a while, started to unfollow. So we thought about Judas, Peter, and Timothy. But I just wonder, as Jeff read today's reading for us, if you noticed the last of the unfollowers. Maybe you did. Maybe you're like, I don't recall anybody unfollowing in that moment. Quite an eclectic character. Once you've started to think about it, it's hard to stop thinking about it. It's there in verse 51 and verse 52. I can't think that I've ever heard anybody preach on it. But here we go. So this guy scrambles away and in the melee loses his clobber, loses his clothes, and runs off into the night. Just a bit of detail that might help us sort of process the story. Mark's gospel, at least for me, and I've been told about this, it's kind of the most dynamic gospel. My old New Testament teacher used to tell me that it was Tarantino-esque. So I don't know if you're familiar with Quentin Tarantino and his work. Maybe that was a bit of a stretch. Maybe he saw the class waning interest and he thought, I need to get him back. So he said, yeah, Mark, of all the Gospels, Mark is Tarantino-esque. It's fast-paced. There's a lot of violence in it. Don't duck any of the violence. And at times, he's not afraid to leave you hanging. He's not afraid to put what feels like quite cryptic, sort of enigmatic notes. And so you've got to do a little bit of work, not least with this story here, with this guy who in a struggle loses his, that's quite a struggle, isn't it? In a struggle loses all of his clothes and disappears into the night. As far as I understand it, Mark put this gospel together probably with a wee bit of help. I think maybe they were all put together like that, but as far as I know, I think it was Peter who helped him out. And there must have been a moment when these two sat together. Maybe I'm spinning it a bit too far, but they must have had a discussion where, having written it down, Peter looked at him and went, should we put this in? Is this just a bit weird? Should we take it out? But it got in. It's in the story. Why is it in the story? I wonder if I could show you a little still shot. I can show you a still shot. That's fantastic. From a film, Schindler's List. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I'm guessing about maybe half the room will have seen this film. It's an incredible story of the Holocaust, the disturbing, and a great story of redemption in and amongst the Holocaust. But along the way, you get these little glimpses of this little girl who, in quite an enigmatic way, with no backstory, no plot resolution that I can remember, no lines. Yeah, a hugely significant piece of the story. When I left the cinema, when I went to watch it, everybody that exited the film was talking about it. When I watched it with my kids recently, they were talking about this girl in red. And that's why she's there, I think. There probably is a YouTube clip about this where Spielberg explains exactly why. But my understanding is, in a way, she's the character that brings everybody in to the story. Her anonymity, this odd bit of colour, this no backstory. She allows us all to enter the story of the horror of the Holocaust. And we can all say, yeah, that probably could have been any of us. I think I'm going to have to watch a Google clip after about it, but I think that's what it does. It brings us all in to the story. It looks like it's just an idle bit of cinema, perhaps, if you don't pay attention to it. And I think that's what's going on here, at least in part what's going on here. This story of this guy with no known name. There are different theories. And we're seeing this guy, Jesus, and being persuaded of like the necessity of his journey. But as we get brought into this story, we're being hit with the reality. I think that's one of the things that Mark's doing. And he's saying to us, tragic and horrific though this is, much brilliant though it is, important though it is, we wouldn't be able to go with him. We would have to leave him there. And I think he asks us to feel that and to know that would be our story. Just so you know, this is chapter 14 of Mark. It's not an isolated bit of the story. It feels to me, and talk to me afterwards, it feels to me like a bit of a crescendo as other disciples, at least in Mark's account, start to unfollow. It feels like the story, at least how Mark tells it, starts to unravel around about it. They're in the garden, and when they should be praying, the disciples fall asleep. When they need to be wise and peaceful, they start to fight. When Jesus is betrayed and they should unite and they should pull together and look after each other, they scatter. And when they seize Jesus, it records for us there at the end of one, I can't think which verse it is. Yeah, it's verse, oh, Jeff's not got the verses written out, that's throwing me. It says that they all deserted him and fled. They all deserted him and fled. Well, there was just one left. The last to leave, it appears, is this young guy. Some scholars, most of the scholars I read, think John Mark, who wrote the Gospel of Mark, might have been writing himself into the story. They assume it might be him. In his linen garment, just out of bed, scratching his head, trying to figure out what's going on. And this person gets caught up in it, but they are so desperate to leave. This is what we're supposed to appreciate, I think, in the story. They're so desperate to leave, they run away, and in the running away, they lose their clothes. They are so desperate to get out of the way. They are willing to suffer any kind of indignity other than the indignity of being seen with Jesus. The cross looms so large, I think, that this chap flees. Now, in the gospel accounts, the disciples were at pains to say, Peter perhaps most strongly, we will never leave you. You know, you can hear that refrain throughout the Gospels, particularly Peter. We're not going to leave. We're not going to leave. No matter what happens, Jesus, we're not going to leave. And maybe, especially Easter week or in church, if somebody asked you about your faith and your story, you might have a similar kind of answer. Yeah, this is my faith. Nothing would pull me away from this story. Nothing would shake this. I follow Jesus, and that's that. And yet Mark, I think in a bit of a Tarantino-esque way, is honest with us enough to say, you need to know. Like this guy who legs it when it gets too much. Everybody, all of us, will run. Now this matters, I think, in terms of how we understand our faith. So just trying to open up this idea of faith a little bit. Faith is, at least to my mind, it is about resolve. It is about devotion. It is about long suffering. It is about endurance. They are part of the way that faith changes and transforms us. All those kind of disciplines, if you like, but all those kind of disciplines are also the traits of crazy megalomaniacs. Resolve, devotion, long suffering, endurance. They don't define faith on their own. Faith has to be more than that. There is another ingredient to faith that we've got to learn if we're going to be faithful. If you've ever struggled with your mental health, which didn't used to be any of us, and now most of us. If you've ever struggled with any kind of addictive behaviors, which again didn't used to be any of us, and now it can be lots of us, you'll know what happens. The first thing that you do in these moments and in these circumstances is you say, I can fix this. I can power through this. Bit of self-determination, bit of resolve. I'll turn this thing around. I'll just push through it. And if you've been through any of that stuff, you'll know as well that that's just not gonna cut it. That's not the way to bring transformation and to bring change. Change comes when you see yourself, when you're able to look at yourself and know that you can't actually fix it, when the problem is bigger than you are, when you're able to put your hand up and ask for help. You have to see yourself. You have to be able to look yourself in the eye, whatever that looks like. And the cross, I think we see this in the story, the cross is a way that we're able to do that. As we journey towards the cross, as we follow Jesus, as our faith heads in that direction, which it inevitably will, we are forced at some bit to be able to look at ourselves. If you believe, and maybe ask yourself this question, if you believe deep down that you can fix yourself, just push back on your pride for a second and just ask yourself that question. If you believe deep down that you can fix it, if you believe deep down that you can turn it around, then a savior for you, a savior, Jesus, is always going to just be an option. Not a king, not a savior. He's just going to be a nice option. If you think living well, living the best life is just about your resolve and your strength, God can only ever just be a bonus, a novelty idea. And he's not. He can't be that. Unless you know that without him, like this guy, and it's painfully illustrated to us, like this guy, if you know that without him, you're definitely going to fall, unless you know that, then he can never really pick you up. That's what faith is. So that's the first bit of the talk, dissected, hopefully. It's hopefully an eye-popping scene, the kind that Tarantino might give. And then Mark gives us another one, and it's a slightly different view. So just read through with me verse 16, 1 to 3. So just scanning over. This is another eye-popping story. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so they might anoint Jesus' body. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, who'll roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb? It's a different place that we get to. Mary and Salome. They were heading to the tomb, and they go there with all the kit and caboodle ready for death. Ready for, this is a sad walk. This is heading to a funeral stuff. It's sad, and it's tense, and it's dramatic. And then they have this nice bit of chat on the way where they remember halfway down the road, I guess, that there's a huge, great big stone in their way. And they have a little bit of chat about, well, how on earth are we going to get in? And I imagine as I imagine it, what a creative sentence. As I think about this moment, I imagine them talking, who's going to move the stone, and then they get there. I think that's how it's written, round the corner, and the stone is rolled away. And then they're outside. Hearts pounding, terrified, steeling themselves as to whether they should go in. And then you get verse 4 and verse 5. And when they looked up and they saw the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away, as they entered the tomb. Now just follow this as close as you can. This is a young man dressed in white robes, in a white robe, sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Don't be alarmed, he said. You're looking for Jesus, the Nazarene who was crucified. He's not here. He's risen. Just flick back to the last guy that we were talking about, the guy who fled. Remember the image of him in the linen cloth that came away when he ran and when he led it? He was described as a young man. There is some repetition of words that Mark uses here with both these characters. In the tomb, there is another young man. It's the same word. And he's in a linen cloth. Again, it's the same word. It's not used very often in the New Testament, let alone in Mark. And he's not running. He's not fleeing. He's not anxious, and he's not scared. He's sat down. And he's not denying or running away from Jesus. He's declaring the truth about him. I think at the very least, Mark's asking us to notice this with his careful use of words. It's a bit of a contrast. Mark shows us that we can be governed by fear in our lives. We can choose, or we can end up being governed by fear and shame and death. We can have that in front of us, but we can also be governed by hope and light and life and truth. He tells us, I think, as we look at the last story, to think on that we need to be able to see ourselves as we are, to have saving faith, but we also need to be able to see him and what he's doing and what he brings to have saving faith. And the angel, I think, gives us three really cool reminders so that we can look at ourselves, but we can also look at him and what we have in him. So these are your three take-homes. The angel sort of reminds these two women that it's finished, you're covered, and you're sent. It's finished, you're covered, and you are sent. So first of all, one of the things that you notice, it's kind of a minor detail, but it's actually really cool when you think about all of the chaos that's going on. The angels just sat down, which I think is really awesome in this quite scary place. Matthew records it, that he was sat on top of the stone. This is a chaotic time. It's a terrifying time. Everybody's scared. Everybody's running off in different directions. And yet this angel, he's not running. He's not anxious. He's sat down. It's a reminder, I think, for us. Those who hope in him, who trust him, and who've got faith in him will one day sit with him. Or maybe more accurately, and speak to me afterwards if I've got this wrong, he is beginning to seat. We will be sat down, but he is leading us to our chairs, as far as I can understand it. He's saying, find your seat. Settle in, because I took death. The sting that you fear in death is gone now. You don't have to think of death in that same way. You can stop running. You don't need to save your skin all the time. You don't need to prove yourself all the time. I took all of that. Jesus is sat down. In the Bible, when you talk about somebody being seated, it's often with the idea of completion. The high priest, we read in Hebrews, is always on his feet, running about. He's got loads to do, never going to get through the day's work. But our great high priest, Jesus, is sat down. One sacrifice for all is completed. It's finished. These women sound awesome to me. I love their story. I love that they're the only ones that didn't flee. They're brave. They're the first witnesses of the risen Christ. They're the first messengers of the risen Christ. But awesome though they are, they're scared and they're ready to run. I imagine their hearts are pounding. And then they have this moment when they look in the tomb and they see an angel that is sat down. They've got 1,000,001 things to do. They've got 1,000,001 preoccupations. Their hearts are racing and pounding. Everybody around them is anxious, but there's an angel that's sat down, chilling, relaxed, because it's finished. You might well be somebody who needs to hear those words today. That it's finished. The work of salvation, God's love demonstrated, the cost, it's finished. Thinking all the time that you need to prove yourself, always having something to prove to somebody. It's finished. God knows you, and he loves you and would die for you. That's finished. When you put your news on and you're thinking that darkness is more powerful than light, anytime you dare be brave enough to stick the news on or consume the news, you think, oh man, darkness. This is dark, and darkness is stronger than light. You need to know that it's finished. The light overcame. Love overcame. That's finished. Thinking that you're stuck in the same place and you're never going to get past this moment, nothing's ever going to change for you. That is finished. You are a new creation. You are changed. What Jesus did has changed all that. You're just going to have to catch up with it. Thinking that sin has got power over your life, which we do, don't we? Doesn't it feel like that? Sin's got the upper hand. It's got the upper hand again. It hasn't. It's finished. We're just catching up. First thing that the angel reminds us joyously, it's finished. We're just learning how to sit down. The second thing that the angel tells them is that they're covered. We're covered. We are clothed in righteousness. Nakedness, like this poor fella that runs off into the night, is often in the Bible a picture of shame and vulnerability. This idea, and you can think back to Adam and Eve, this idea that we are exposed, the truth about us is going to be made known, or we're about to be exposed. And if we're honest, I think that's especially today, it feels like very much so today, with the way that we share news and we consume information about each other. We know that worry, that life's got a way of catching us out, and it can kind of hang over us. Not that we're going to ever get cancelled or anything like that, but it can be quite a small thing that just sort of gnaws away at us like a nagging doubt. If people really knew, I have this, you must have this as well. If people really knew me, someday that's got to come out. We're not going to quite measure up to how everybody hopes that we're going to be. And that can actually be, in a odd, quiet way, it can be a huge thing. We can find ourselves running for all of our lives. The resurrection means that the cross worked. Jesus being raised from the dead means that the cross worked, and it means that our sins are covered and we are dressed in righteous white robes, which is quite a thing. John talks about it in Revelation, and it's in chapter 7. So we don't have the text up, but maybe you could have a look afterwards if you're interested in this thing. It's this really cool sort of back and forth conversation, and John has a vision or a dream of heaven and what it's like, and he sees millions of believers, of saints that are dressed in white. And my take, for what it's worth, is it's not the uniform that we get when we get to heaven, could be, but my take is it's like figurative. We are dressed in the righteous acts of Jesus. We are made new. We are new creations, and that's what's seen. That's what John sees. People who are walking around righteous. And then if you read through John chapter 7, there's an elder that speaks up. There's this back and forth, and it's probably not the case, but I've imagined this elder to be quite grumpy, because he sort of says, as he sees all these saints, all these multitudes of saints, he says, who are they and where did they all come from? Which I think is hilarious. I imagine that in my own, again, imagination, great sentence again, that he's seen the world and how messed up it is, and how terrible it is, and how broken it all is. And yet he's looking in heaven and he's like, there's millions of people who've turned their lives around. They're all white, dressed in white robes, pure. How has this happened? Like quite grumpily. Where have they all come from? How's it all happened? And then the refrain, the answer comes back in this back and forth. into this pristine, people wearing white robes, heavenly, glorious scene, the answer comes back. These people are dressed in white garments, pure, because they are washed, and this is hard to get your head around. It's an odd sort of washing machine analogy. These people are dressed in white robes because they are washed in the blood of the Lamb. These people are made clean and pure because of that bloody, awful mess that the cross was. Everything that you can think of got put on Jesus on there, and because of that, these people are made clean. That's how we're dressed, if we believe in him. Maybe you've had one of those moments when somebody's come up to you, and this might be because, in light of coming to faith or something like that, where somebody comes up to you and says, "You've really changed." I haven't had one for a while, but maybe you've had one recently. "You've really changed. What's happened with you?" And you sort of feel a bit good about yourself, and you say something like, "Well, I made a few improvements, and I sort of got myself together, and I sort of had a good think about things." And hopefully, somewhere in that conversation, you manage to stop yourself if it's a faith thing that's changed you, and you say, "Actually, it's not that. Actually, I looked at the blood of the Lamb. I noticed the story of the cross, and I noticed that all of that was just for me. That's the only reason any changes have been made at all." That's what clothes us. That's what covers us. And it matters. It matters, I think, because, as I've said already, I think we carry around a bit of that worry all the time. That somebody's going to find the truth out about us. Somebody's going to pin something else on us. There's going to be stuff that we've done that somebody's going to want to rake up, and it can ruin us. And we can even worry that there's stuff that we're going to do that'll undermine us into the future. And the amazing truth about the cross, about the blood of the Lamb, and this is what the gospel story is: whatever anybody pulls up on you, whatever anybody pulls up on me, whatever you've not even done yet, it's all hit Jesus on the cross. Nobody can dig up anything on you that he hasn't seen and said, "I'm happy to die for that. I'm happy to die for that." So we are all clothed, if we believed, in righteous robes. Last thing that the angel says. So he says, "Remember you're seated. Remember it's finished. Remember what you're wearing. Remember you're covered and you're clothed." And then he says, "Remember you're sent." When we hear the angel, if we would hear the angel, if we would see the angel, we can remember our purpose. When Jesus was taken from the disciples, when he was pulled away, if you read any of the Gospels that you read about it, the disciples were completely lost. Their compass had been ripped away from them. They were just confused. They didn't know what to do. They were running in every different direction. The guy that we've thought about that was running off into the night with no clothes on is a great picture of where the disciples were at, I think. It's no plan to run off into the night with no clothes on. It's a vivid picture, isn't it? But that's where the disciples were. They were just completely lost and abandoned. And the words that pull things back together, the start of the restoration journey, come out of the mouth of this angel. And where there was silence, and when there was panic, and where there was no way, this angel, if you see in his words, starts to speak order. You're looking for Jesus, he says. He's not here. He's risen. And here's the plan. Go tell the disciples, he's going ahead of you to Galilee. You'll see him just as he told you. Now just think on that for a second. These are the words that turned everything round. It's not that radical of a plan. Doesn't sound on the face of it even like a master plan. It sounds like quite a normal thing. It was actually something that they already knew. That's the plan. Take the message of Jesus, go back to your homes and to your towns, and just know that Jesus goes ahead of you in all of those things. It's a fairly simple thing, and yet that is enough. That message would be enough that grace would blossom. That message would be enough that the church would be born against all odds and all persecution. That would be enough that people that were completely lost would be found. It would change the whole world, that simple plan. Take the message of Jesus back to your homes. Just know Jesus goes ahead of you. A simple task. Somebody at communion in the week, in their prayer, they spoke about the tomb. I said something really interesting about the tomb that I'd not thought of before. He said this, and just think about whether you agree with this statement or not. They said, the stone wasn't rolled away so Jesus could get out. The stone wasn't rolled away so Jesus could get out. Think about all of the stories about Jesus. He didn't need doors, windows, or anything. He could get in and out of anywhere. The stone wasn't rolled away so that Jesus could get out. It was rolled away so that we could get in, so that these women could get in and see that he wasn't there and believe that what he said was true. Let me pass on to you the words of that angel. Let me pass on to you a really ordinary plan that comes from the heavens, I would say. Go back to your homes and your towns. Take the message of Jesus and believe that he goes ahead of you. And then, who knows what will happen? God grabs our attention, I think, in a Tarantino-esque way. Mark pulls us in so that we see something. He says to us, human beings, in all your mess, you need to see your plight. You need to be able to look at yourself and see the end of you so that you can start with me. But he doesn't just tell us to look at ourselves. He asks us to look at who he is and where he's going. And he tries to move us. He moves us from being people that run to people that are able to really rest and sit. From people who are exposed or worried about being exposed to people who know that they are covered in the blood of the Lamb. And from people who are lost and struggling to know what on earth to do with their lives, to being people who know they are made and created on this earth for a reason.